1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Is the sound working? Anybody knows? יש לך sound? 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3.
משנתך המה ינחמוני, תערוך לפני שולחן נגד צורריי, דשנת בשמן ראשי כוסי רוויה, אך טוב וחסד ירדפוני כל ימי חיי, ישבתי בבית אדוני לאורך ימים. The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures, leads me to water in places of repose. He renews my life, guides me in right paths, as befits his name. Though I walk through a valley of deepest darkness, I fear no harm, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You spread a table for me in full view of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My drink is abundant. Only goodness and steadfast love shall pursue me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord for many long years. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today, and for everyone online for finding their way here. My name is Cantor Leslie Emery, and I'm from Congregation Shaarey Zedek. It's my honor to be here with you all today, officiating at the funeral of Barbara Borenstein, known to the Jewish people as Batya Bat Yisrael V'Sarah, who passed away June 24th, the 28th of Sivan, at the age of 93. Betty was married to her husband David for 65 years when he passed away in 2014. They are survived by their two sons, Akiva with Mara, Yossi with Eti, 4 grandchildren, 2 in Winnipeg, Leah and Danielle, Ari and Karen, and 2 grandchildren in Israel, Ron and Eti and Yuda and Orna. She is survived by 8 great-grandchildren, 5 in Israel, Itai, Tal, Lior, Eden, and Almog, and 3 in Winnipeg, Alexa, Lauren, and Avery. I know Betty's family and friends will feel this loss, and I could share more words. However, I think it's important that we find a way to connect all the way from Israel to here in Winnipeg for this moment, and so I'd like to invite Betty's grandson Ari to share a message from the family in Israel.
Thank you. I'll read it in English because I think my kid's Hebrew is better than mine at this point. Thank you for being the most powerful mom, grandma, and great-grandma. We're also thankful for everything you taught us. Thank you for always being there. You were a strong and amazing woman, our role model. Words can't describe how much you meant to us, and your spirit will always live in our hearts. You lived a life full of beautiful memories, which will stay with us forever. We love you and miss you deeply. You are our guardian angel. We promise to remember you every time we go to the casino and every time we eat falafel. Rest in peace, with love, all the family from Israel.
Next, I'd like to invite Betty's granddaughter, Leah, to give the eulogy.
I have spent a lot of time thinking about what to say today, how to sum up my grandma in just a few minutes. It makes sense that it would be hard for me to find a way to keep this short and sweet, because the main memory I have of my grandma is that she loved to talk. So I guess I come by it honestly. So this probably won't be short, but it will most definitely be sweet. So get comfortable. My grandmother was a survivor. She survived the Holocaust and did everything in her power to make sure that her story was never forgotten. She wrote about her time during the Holocaust and had many of her stories published in magazines. She recently shared one of these with my brother Ari, who was able to translate it thanks to ChatGPT. I would like to share a small part of the story she was so proud of, so that we can hear part of her journey through her own words. The following is an excerpt of her story. My mother carried them in a leather pouch, which she wore on a string around her neck under her shirt. Nervously, she fumbled with it and searched for the papers. Finally, she was able to hand them to the officer, who stretched out his hand demandingly. No sooner had he seen them that he said in German, "Jews, oh Jews, not behind barbed wire, not starved, not gassed, but free." Soon the commander of the troop, a Jew from Vienna who fled to America in 1937 and returned with the American troops at the end of the war, arrived. Now we were generously given food and drink and were told that we no longer lacked anything. We received clothes and blankets. One day the commander brought us to our new home. On the wall of our first apartment, my mother wrote in large letters, "Arthur, we are alive. Your children are waiting for you." We stayed in that little apartment, always waiting. Mother wrote to all the authorities and gave them our new address. Now began the waiting for our father. One day we heard from an acquaintance that father was sick in the hospital. Through injections that had been given to him in the concentration camp to experiment on him, he had been paralyzed. He was a human wreck when mother brought him home to the new home we'd been able to move into. All examinations and operations they performed on father were unsuccessful. He remained in great pain, which could only be alleviated with injections, and was confined to bed. Mother cared for him for years with devoted loyalty. I joined a Jewish youth group, learned Hebrew, and helped my mother in the household. Eventually, I married a young man from this youth group and went with him to Israel, where we built a new life. For my mother, the years of the war had not passed without a trace. The war years had worn her down. Eventually, she had to go to the hospital, and during that time became increasingly weaker, more forgetful, and more helpless. Finally, she no longer recognized us, and one day she closed her eyes forever. Father died in the summer, when the sun smiled from the sky, like today, accompanied by helpful people to Mother's grave. I always remember him. After reading this story written by my grandma, so much of the way she lived her life made sense to me. She was devoted to her family. She lost my grandfather 12 years ago, a man that she insisted she take care of when she was in her 80s and he was unable to get out of his own hospital bed. My grandfather, for those of you that don't know, was a pretty stubborn man, and he refused to go to the hospital during the end of his illness. He demanded a hospital bed be placed in the middle of the living room so he could stay at home and be taken care of by my grandma. And my grandma took care of him without complaint. She walked with a cane at this point, but she could flip my grandpa around that bed with one hand tied behind her back. She took care of him at home until he passed. They were married for 65 years. She saw plenty of heartache in her 93 years, but she also experienced so much joy. In Israel, she raised 2 boys. One was a clown, a comedian, a wild child. The other, quiet and soft-spoken. And if you've ever met my father and my uncle, you can most certainly guess which one is which. When they moved to Canada, they purchased a Shell gas station on Corydon and Waterloo, and then they purchased a grocery store that they owned for 4 years. She had nightmares about kids stealing candy at the grocery store while she was not looking. After this, she worked at Zellers, where the people got on her nerves because as soon as she folded the children's clothes on the shelf, a customer would sort through it and mess it all up again. She had nightmares about this as well. She was also a companion for the elderly at the Shaarey home. My grandma was well known for striking up a conversation with anyone. She made friends of all ages, mostly due to the high demand for her longest lasting and most enjoyable line of work. You see, my grandma could predict your future. At least that's what many people believed that paid for her to come and read their cards. She was known throughout the city for this, and she was invited regularly to house parties where she would take turns reading the guests' cards. Her following was truly amazing, and I believe that if they had social media back then, she definitely would have had over 1 million followers. She was also a coin saver. There was always a bucket of coins hidden somewhere for a rainy day. When she moved from her house 5 years ago, my dad was on a mission to find all the coins. He first found some in the freezer. Then under a pillow, he found a box of rolled up nickels and quarters. All in all, it added up to over $500. Fast forward 5 years later, just last week, cleaning out her place at the Shaftesbury, it was the same thing all over again. Piles of coins locked up in the computer desk, more rolled up nickels hidden in the dresser, and more coins hidden in the bathroom. All in another few $100s. My grandma was also driving until she was 88 years old. We had begged her many times to stop driving. She was a horrible driver. We tried taking her car away or making sure that when it went into the shop to get fixed, it took extra long. She was regularly parking on curbs or just right in the middle of the street. But she was stubborn and she was independent. And it wasn't until she finally moved into the Shaftesbury residence that she agreed to give up her car because we told her they didn't have any parking spots for her. My grandmother lived a full life. She raised 2 boys. She even had a cow named Ditsa. She was overjoyed to become a grandmother when her son Yossi had 2 sons, Ron and Yuda, and she made many trips back to Israel to be with them. One of her most precious memories was just over 44 years ago, when, of course, I was born. Followed a few years later by my brother Ari. That wasn't quite as exciting, but I'm sure she did a good job pretending she was excited about him as she was by me. And now her life was complete, as she had grandchildren to spoil just down the street. I have countless memories of my time with my grandma. I remember my brother and I arguing every weekend about whose turn it was to have a sleepover at my grandma's. The main reason I think we both wanted to go was because my grandma made the most amazing toast. She put it in the toaster, just like everyone else. She buttered it, just like everyone else. But she had this very extra special twist she put on it, and I don't even know if my brother remembers this. She had a cookie cutter that she would press into the bread so that it had an imprint of a smiley face. That was all it took to make it the absolute best toast ever. She would stay up with me as late as I wanted, rubbing my back and telling me stories about a made-up little girl named Silly Sally that always got into so much trouble. Stories that I have heard her recently telling my daughter, the exact same ones about the exact same girl named Silly Sally. She was an amazing baker. I would go over regularly to help her bake her special German cheesecake, and she even let me lick the batter off the spoon. This was before we knew it wasn't safe to eat raw eggs, but it was definitely worth every risky lick. My grandmother's number one priority was always family. She was always happiest when surrounded by her loved ones. Her extended family grew over time, and she was overjoyed every time a new family member joined the group. Once you married into this family, she truly considered you one of her own. Her daughter-in-laws, Mara and Etty, her great-granddaughter-in-laws, Orna, Etty, and Karen, and her great-grandson-in-law, Daniel. She loved them like her own. She did not introduce them any differently. They were her daughters and her grandchildren, just the same as those who had been born a Borenstein. She had 4 grandchildren and 8 great-grandchildren. She stayed connected to all her great-grandchildren wherever they were in Israel. Itai, Tal, Lior, Eden, and Almog, or Winnipeg, Alexa, Lauren, and Avery. Her 3 little granddaughters in Winnipeg were her greatest treasure. Up until her last days in the hospital, those girls were the only things that got her to open her eyes. If I dared showed up to visit without Avery, I would just spend the entire time answering questions about how she was doing. My parents spent countless hours supporting my grandma after my grandfather passed away. There was forever a list of things around the house that my grandpa had fixed in his own special handyman way that needed tending to when my grandma was in the house alone. My dad was in charge of taking over all the household things, from dealing with the plastic my grandpa would wrap around the windows in the winter, fixing the car from my grandmother's progressively worse driving habits, and dealing with the basement full of shoes that my grandpa left behind. When my brother and I both moved south, my dad always said they had to stay north because they needed to be close to my grandma, and we all knew she was not leaving without a fight. My mom and her also had a special bond, especially in the later years when my grandma needed more help and more support. My mom would take her to appointments, check in on her to make sure she was taking her pills, and even go over when home care said she refused to get out of bed in the mornings. When my grandma was taken to the hospital, it was my mom that sat over 12 hours in the waiting room with her sitting upright in a chair. She visited her every day, making sure she knew she was never alone. When my mom left the hospital for the last time on Tuesday, she whispered to my grandma, "It's time to go now, Betty. It's time to be with David." And she passed 1 hour later. My grandmother had 2 main hobbies she carried into her old age. She absolutely loved going to Yee's buffet. She would happily tell you every time she saw you how delicious it was, and she would offer to take you in a heartbeat. Her other love was the casino. She loved it so much, she would sneak out of the house when my grandfather was alive to go to the casino, and when she won, she would keep it a secret. She loved telling the story about the time she played the penny machine and won $900 in pennies. She insisted on taking home her winnings and rolling them all by herself, which probably explains why she always had rolled coins hidden all over her house. She would disappear for hours on end, only to claim she was at the casino and she had won again. The last thing you might not know about my grandma is that she goes by many names. We actually don't know what her real name is. All her documents have a different name on it. Barbara, Margaret, Margarita, Betty. So I guess the question is, did she really go to the casino all those times, or was that a cover for some sort of secret life she seemed to be living? But no matter what name she went on by any given day, we all just knew her as Sapti. She was a force. She was strong-willed, some may say stubborn, and she loved with her whole entire heart. Her family was the world to her, and she took such joy in being in the presence of those she loved. And as my daughter Avery told me this week, it's okay. Don't be sad. We have so many amazing memories. And I think some of the great-granddaughters have some things they'd like to say. Avery?
We all Thank you for always being here for me, and all of our memories will be in our heart. We love you and we will miss you.
May your Sapti's memory, may Betty's memory always be a blessing. She sounds like such an incredible human being to have had in your lives for so many years. We're going to continue with the memorial prayer, the El Malei Rachamim. El Malei Rachamim Shochen Mamromim Ametzeh Menucha Nechona Tachat Kanfei HaShechina B'malot Kedoshim Utehorim Kezohar Harakia Mashirim Et Nishmat Batya Bat Yisrael V'Sara Shelcha Leolama Began Eden Tehei Menuchata Anabal Rachamim Hastirei Beseta Kenafecha Lolamim Utzerur Bitzror Chaim Et Nishmata Adonai Hu Nachalata V'tanuach B'Shalom Hamishkava V'nomar Amen. Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure to the soul of Betty Borenstein, who has gone to her eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May her soul be bound up in the bond of life. May she rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. I'm aware that we are connecting family in two very different locations at the same time here today. And so I'd like to invite Yossi, Betty's son in Israel, to lead the Mourner's Kaddish for everyone with you. And we'll join together over here. Yitkadal v'yitkadash Shemei Rabbah Be'alma divrach hirutei v'yamlich malchutei B'chayechon uvyomechon v'chayei dekol Beit Yisrael Ba'agala uvizman kari v'imru Amen. Yehei Shmei Rabbah mevarach le'alam l'almei almaya Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh V'yitadar v'yitale v'yitalal Shemei dekudesha brichu Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata Tushbechata v'nechamata Damiram be'alma v'imru Amen. Yehei Shlama Rabba min Shemaya V'chaim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Oseh shalom bimromav Hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru Amen. Thank you all once again for joining us today. Betty certainly lived a remarkable life, and her memory will live on with all of us. There will be no formal meal of consolation or Shiva held. However, the family would like to take this opportunity to thank Betty's home care workers who were very good to her. In lieu of flowers, Betty's family requests donations to Jewish Child and Family Service. Our final act today is one of the most important acts of kindness in Judaism, an act that can never be repaid. It's the ultimate act of chesed, to bury a loved one. And so, we're going to take a moment for the family, of course, to shovel first. Everybody should take about 3 shovels, and then put the shovel back down and wait for the next person to have a turn. May Betty's memory always be a blessing. Take care, and thank you again for joining us today.
like your mouth.